The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everybody. This is Dr. Gwilliam. We'll get started in just a moment, so hang on for just a moment and we'll get things going. All right, well, welcome to today's webinar. This is Dr. Gwilliam. I am the Clinical Director for PayDC Chiropractic EHR. This is kind of a special event. We do webinars a couple times a month for PayDC clients and friends. And this one, though, was initiated by a couple of my friends out there in Virginia for the association. And so I'm happy to have those of you who are joining us from Virginia. This is sort of this one was set up just for you at your request, but I expanded it to include my other friends and others on my list. So we've got people from all over, but special shout out for those of you in Virginia. The purpose of today's webinar is to talk about some specific issues that some doctors run into with some denials around certain therapeutic procedure codes. So we're going to dive into those in the next 45 to 60 minutes we have together. A couple of things I want you to know. We do have the ability for you to submit questions. It's in the toolbar that's probably on the right-hand side of your screen. And so I encourage you to use that toolbar to submit questions for me. I'll try to watch those and see what's popping up there. In fact, just for fun, let me do this. Webcam, there we go. I like to gesture when I speak, and so I'm going to turn on my webcam so you guys can see me, so you know I'm really here. There we go. Very nice. I'm traveling today, so this is my sister's home in Houston, Texas. So I'm all over the place. So hello, everybody. I'm going to be doing a lot of this because that's how I do this. First question just came in from Scott. He said, we're going to tape this. Yeah, we're recording this, and it'll be available on our website a little later for you to review. We're going to hit some pretty heavy stuff a little ways into this. So stay tuned, and if you're losing me or if we're having some problems, then send some comments my way, and I'll try to watch those as we go along. I'm kind of hosting this one all by myself too. Submit your questions. I'll watch them, but I have a lot of stuff to cover here, and I want to give you guys information to help you understand how to deal with these denials you've been getting and how to know how to properly document and code for 4 different codes, actually, we're going to go over. I also, just so you understand, that this webinar is being provided free of charge. So I'm going to hit you up a couple of times throughout this with various products and services. So just be aware of that. That's the trade-off. I'm going to let you know about some resources you can look into to get some extra help. And some of them are going to cost you money should you choose to take part in that. So be aware of that. But I'm going to give you great info anyway. So those of you who don't know me, I am a chiropractor who is also a certified professional coder, auditor. I'm a fellow at the American Academy of Professional Coders, and I'm the clinical director for PayDC, which is the most compliant chiropractic EHR software out there. And so they are the ones that are kind of sponsoring this event. And so, again, I hope that you get what you're looking for here today. Just a little bit more about me. That's what I looked like 45 pounds ago. I have a number of degrees and all these certifications because I care about this stuff and I get excited about it. I think I can help you and I know what's going on. So I'm going to share with you my perspective as a chiropractor, but also as an auditor and a coder so that you know just what you need to do when communicating with these third parties. Just so you know some of the work I do, I literally just got off a conversation with an attorney who was going to have me testify as to the proper use of a certain code in a certain situation. There was a lawsuit, and once, actually, I was I don't know if this is good or bad. He told the opposing counsel that they were going to hire me to come in and testify, and the opposing counsel said, well, never mind, we won't appeal anymore, because they were scared of me. They knew that they couldn't win, maybe. I don't know, or maybe there have been other factors, but I like to think it was because of me. So here's what we're going to do today. we're going to look at some of the top modality and therapeutic procedure codes. Actually, we're looking at 4 specific ones. This is part of a longer presentation I pared down for you. I'm going to cover the fundamentals and coding rules first, and then we're going to dive into those 4 codes and look at the details around them, and we're going to talk about modifiers, diagnosis codes, documentation requirements. I don't want you to get denials. I want you to feel like if you get called and someone says, I want to see your records, you go, have at them. I have no fear. Here they are. Take a look, because you have nothing to hide and you feel like your records, you know exactly what should be there. And if they don't like it, you can appeal and deny and fight and get what you deserve, which is to get paid for the work you do to help your patients. So that's what we're going to try to do here. I do want to let you know that if you feel like you need deeper help, this is an example of an audit report that I do individually, and you can contact me and let me know about this. I got my email coming up later. I can let you know if it's something you want to do. This is an audit I did last year for a clinic, and you can see here they got a C+. I had a number of points available, and they got 77% of those. And you can see how they scored on different sections of their notes. They did really good on reevaluations, but they did lousy on initial evaluations. And so what this report does is it dials in the details in each of these. It looks more like this. We're going to talk about this code today, but this is part of one of my audit reports. And you can see here I audited 97110 from a clinic. They got an F. I assigned some point values, and I told them what was present and deficient. I added some notes here to help them understand what to do. So I wanted you to know that this is a service that's available to you, and if you're interested in a 3-chart audit with a report that looks like this, there's more details to it, but just email me. My email's on the screen there. So that's my first of a couple of commercials I'm going to share with you today. I'm going to tell you all my secrets, so don't feel like I'm holding back and trying to get you to buy stuff. I would love for you to buy stuff, and I can give you more details, but I'm not holding back in this webinar. I'm going to tell you everything that I would apply if I was auditing your records. So this is part of a report where you can send me records and I'll audit them for you. Just email me at the email address you see on your screen and say I want to know more about it, and I'll give you the details of how it works, okay? And it is special right now. So we'll dive into all this stuff, but this is basically an audit of 97110 is what you're looking at here. So I do want to review quickly where I'm getting all my information from, and I have a number of sources here that I'm going to quote today. One is the ChiroCode desk book. Those of you who know me know that I worked for ChiroCode for about 6 years. I was the vice president there. We produced books. I did webinars and seminars for them, and now I do those things as the clinical director for my software company. I strongly recommend the ChiroCode desk book. I think it's a great reference, and I wrote a lot of it over the many years that I was there. We rewrite it every year. I'm also going to share with you information from the CPT book from the American Medical Association and some of their guidance that they provide through their newsletter called the CPT Assistant. And then I'm going to quote Medicare using some of their guidance on these codes. Even though Medicare doesn't pay Kairos for these codes, Medicare's guidance for these codes is something that we can refer back to because it generally suits all other payers. I'm going to show you Find a Code, which is an online coding library. When we talk about modifiers, we'll discuss Medicare's National Correct Coding Initiative. And I have 1 or 2 quotes in here from Aetna, I think, from private payer policies. So these are these references. Here's the ChiroCode desk book. Here's another commercial. If you don't have it, you should get it. It's a great reference. It's 500 pages, jam-packed with insurance, Medicare, compliance, documentation, coding information, all you could ever dream of. And there's a coupon code here, DRG5OFF. Okay, so that's another quick commercial. Go to ChiroCode, use that coupon, and you'll save a few bucks. What I'm presenting to you today is mostly Chapter 6.2. Okay, it's stuff I wrote for ChiroCode, and this is now my PowerPoint version of that. This is the CPT book, this current edition, and then on the right is this newsletter they send out. You do not need to subscribe to this newsletter. It's about $300 a year. 98% of it doesn't apply to Kairos or even PTs, if there's some PTs on the call. But every once in a while, something good comes out of the CPT Assistant newsletter from the AMA, and we get some good insight. And so there may be some of that in this presentation I'll share with you today. And then this is an example of an LCD. This one's actually from Cahaba, which serves the southeast part of the United States. This is an LCD, a Medicare guidance for physical therapists. So it includes guidance on these codes we're talking about today. So if you ask me, where'd you get that rule? Why do you say it that way? Most of it is from right here. And if you go, well, Blue Cross doesn't do it that way. I get it. It's not going to be exactly the same as every payer. I simply couldn't cover with you every payer's policies. But pretty much if you follow Medicare, you're probably going to satisfy everybody else, okay? This is Find a Code. This is an online subscription. It's $5 a month, then it goes up from there. this is 97140. I looked up on Find a Code in this online coding library. And you can see all these numbers. There's a bunch of menus you can expand upon if you scroll down the screen. I just want you to know where my information came from. Okay, so I got a lot of details from here as well. Things like RVUs, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Faranac is asking, where do you get the ChiroCode desk book? It's chirocode.com. Chirocode.com. Okay. So when we're talking about therapeutic procedures, and let's say we did exercises with a patient. We're doing exercises, which would be 97110. In general, this is the documentation I expect to see at the first visit. So you've seen the patient for the first time. You know you're going to do these therapeutic procedures, and this applies to all these 4 codes we're going to address today. But let's just use 97110 as our baseline. I would like to see history and objective findings that support the diagnosis, that they correlate with each other, and that's part of a bigger discussion. But basically, if you have a diagnosis that makes sense to provide the patient with exercises, then I'm happy to approve that service if I was the payer. This is also where you put in functional limitations and deficits. And I can't tell you how many times I audit charts and I don't see the functional limitations that are documented. You need those. For these codes, you have to show a loss of function and you need to show a gain in function. That is so critical. I can't overemphasize that. So at the first visit, you would talk about a loss of function. Examples would be problems with motion, and I want specific degrees. Problems with strength, I want grades. Problems with balance, I want a discussion of what assistance they might need with balance, whether they can do it unassisted or not, or if they need devices to help them. I want you to talk about coordination for some of these codes, and I want you to identify deficits in that coordination. I want to know about their mobility. So those are examples. Of course, for functional limitations, you can quite easily specify that stuff with outcome assessment questionnaires. Those are huge in providing the details needed for payers to decide whether or not you've established medical necessity for therapeutic procedures. Outcome assessment questionnaires like the Oswestry, Functional Rating Index, etc. And then in the first visit, I need to see the plan. So again, I audit doctors' records, and I see these records where the doctors don't bother explaining that they're going to do a certain service. They just start doing it. And so this is where you can describe the machine settings, if there's a machine being used, or the exercise procedures. You say, look, we're going to do an exercise where we're going to have them strap their head, and then we're going to tie a rubber band to the wall, and we're going to have them turn and strengthen these muscles for the rotators or something. I need a description, at least once in the notes. You don't have to re-describe it every visit, but the first visit, you outline what you're going to do, and then the subsequent visits, I think it's enough to refer back to the first one. So it's also a great place to talk about their purpose. So the purpose would be to restore the lost strength in these muscles. That's what I need to see in the first visit. And if you have all that stuff documented, you got to understand it's going to be really hard for others to deny. I want to know what areas are being treated. So you need to describe that we're doing this in the neck, for example. And then, of course, frequency and duration, which is the thing we mostly remember, but the rest of this sometimes gets overlooked. So you say, well, we're going to do this exercise, 6 times over the next 2 weeks, so 3 times a week. And we expect to be able to measure increased strength through a number of methods, things like that. Now, at subsequent visits, so the first visit, I outlined all that stuff. I laid the foundation. I set it all up. But now it's these follow-up visits, right? And these follow-up visits for the regular treatment or daily visits, I don't need you to tell me all that stuff again. What I really need is the changes. I need to know what changes are happening, subjectively and objectively. So if the patient says they're sleeping more than they used to, or you find that there are muscles that feel different and or the range of motion has changed, those are the subjective and objective changes I care about. I want to know about changes. Those are the most critical things. I also want to know the time, and I don't even care if they're not timed codes. All the codes we're talking about today, though, are time-based. So time is critical, and I believe it's best to do start and stop time, but it's not a requirement, although I did talk to a client yesterday who said that a personal injury carrier required them to do a start and stop time. And I said, well, it's nice to have that, but I think you can argue with them that that's not specifically outlined in the CPT. You just need to say the time, the total time. At typical treatment visits, this is where you say, hey, we had planned to do this exercise this many times, but today we stopped because it was uncomfortable, or we moved on because they were doing so well. And then, of course, the response of the patient. You say, patient, the services were delivered without incident, that type of thing. So that's what I want to see in the typical treatment visits. I don't need you to re-summarize the description of all the services and the goals. As long as I refer back to them, I think that they're available. Now, at the reassessment, so let's say it's been 4 weeks. This is where you stop and go, all right, we had originally made a goal of getting them to increase the strength and decrease their pain and be able to get them to sleep through the night. this is where you would update that and say, hey, the patient says they're sleeping through the night. We can measure this increase in strength. We see the range of motion is better this way. So therefore, we know those exercises worked, and we're going to do some new exercises, and here's what they are. Or we're not doing any more exercises because we've accomplished all our goals. Instead of we just keep doing exercises because we think they're good for people to do, and we're going to bill for them as long as we can. That's not enough. You need to have a specific reason and a purpose and a beginning and an end. Okay? If you have all that in place, payers are going to have a really hard time denying your care. Okay? So this documentation stuff is sort of general. We're going to get into specifics for each code a little further in. Okay? Now this is an example from PayDC. This is the screen where you set up these services. And what I've got here in the upper left is I highlighted the acute stage of care. There's 3 stages for this care plan I'm creating. And in this stage of care, I'm doing the services that are checked off down below. There's 3 services checked off you can see here on the left. And the one that's highlighted is 97110. So in our software, the way we capture all the stuff I just told you should capture, we pick a service and then we outline all these details here on the right. So we identify which procedure it's going to be. So we have all these different options, and you can customize these if you're a subscriber. And we've chosen this particular exercise and its description to show up in the notes. And then we've chosen the locations, and we've identified what part of the body we're going to do this in. And in the very center, we have the number of times per week and the number of weeks, so we can outline the frequency and duration. And then below that, we have the goals or the rationale that describes what we're trying to accomplish with this particular exercise or procedure. And there's a whole bunch here to choose from, and you can add more of your own. So I wanted you to see an example of how this can be done automatically if you have the right software. And frankly, I think PayDC is the right software. And I can say that because it's our webinar. And if you are looking for software, please call us. If you're a lot of you on the call are our current customers, some of you are not. And if you know that this is something that can make your life easier and save some time and money, by all means, give us a call. Let's do or email me, and we'll schedule a demo and we'll show you what's in there, and you can decide. It's very cost effective. It's cloud based, and we got all the answers right here. So that's that's the last commercial. I told you there'd be some commercials today. That's the last one, I think. We got the audits, the record audit we can do for you. We got the ChiroCode desk book. We got our software. So those are the things I would encourage you to talk to me about if you want more help with any of those. The software is PayDC, P-A-Y-D-C. You can go to our website and look up more, or you can just email me, evang@paydc.com, and I'll answer your questions or set up a demo for you. Okay, and that came in from Faranak. He was asking, so that's why I brought that up. I want you guys to know I'm watching your questions pop in here. Sorry, Scott, I ignored your last question, but that's how it goes. We can't answer them all. I'll get back to it at the end. So these are the top codes chiropractors use, therapeutic procedures, and you can see here by rank the most common. We're going to talk about the first 5 except for number 4 today. We don't have time to go through all of these, but we're going to get numbers 1, 2, and 3, and 5 because I was specifically asked to address those because those are the issues my Virginia friends are running into. Okay? So a couple of things for you to note here. Therapeutic procedures, what are they? Well, here are 2 definitions for you. One from the American Medical Association in their CPT manual, how they describe the actual, these codes, and the other one is from Medicare. And they're pretty much the same thing. There's two key phrases in both of these that are very similar. It's function, which I underlined, but I didn't underline clinical skills. So here's the deal. These are services where you find a loss of function and you're improving function using clinical skills. If you can show those things, then you're more likely to be able to justify your service. If you can't prove that the clinical skill was needed, and you can't prove there was loss of function and that your service improves function, then you're up a creek. You can't get paid for that. So loss of function, clinical skills used to improve function. Those are really key concepts with all these codes. Okay. This is an example of a policy bulletin from Aetna, and I don't know if you guys are dealing with Aetna. But it's one of the payers out there, and they said, look, we know that these procedures are good. We recognize they're good for a lot of musculoskeletal conditions, but we want you to get them to the point where they can maintain themselves at home. So I want you to understand that if you're doing exercises forever and you're just stretching it out trying to get paid for 30 visits on exercises, that's not really what it's intended for. Payers believe that you teach them, you get them to where they don't need your skills anymore, and they can do it themselves. That's what they expect to see. And if you feel like you've got this series of exercises where they get increasingly difficult and you change them up, then that would justify the clinical services, the clinical skill needed to develop it. So I encourage you to prove from time to time in your notes why clinical skill is necessary. And if you just taught them you said, hey, I want you to do this chin glide exercise where you just tuck your chin back and create a double chin, and you're trying to improve this posture and restore the curve in your neck. 10 reps. I think that the first couple times I'm with a patient teaching them that exercise that they need my help. But like the 10th time, I don't think I can justify why I'm there telling them to go like this. Like that doesn't make sense to me. So you need to explain why clinical skill is necessary for all these services. Okay. Keep in mind that all these codes we're going to talk about are not limited to a particular group. Some people think because they're called therapies or physical therapy codes are for physical therapists. That's not true. I do want to point out this concept of clinical staff delegation. And I run into this all the time in different states. It's different. Different payers have different deals with it. Some specifically say these services cannot be delegated to anyone. They must be performed by the physician, the one with the license and the MPI number. And that is just how it goes. Your state may be different. I don't know. Your payer may have their own rules. But I'm seeing more and more often either payers or state boards saying, you can't delegate to a staff member to watch someone do exercises. It needs to show clinical skill. And in order to show clinical skill, you got to have someone with a license delivering it. So just keep that in mind. And it's on a case-by-case basis. If you want to play it safe, don't ever delegate these services. Make the doctor be the one who's performing the one-on-one contact. And with time codes, let's talk about time for just a minute. The idea with time, you guys have all heard of these are 15-minute codes that we're talking about today. It means you have to do them for 15 minutes for them to count. But it's explained to us this concept of the 15-minute or the 8-minute rule, where Medicare basically came out and said, look, in order to count 15 minutes of a service, you need to do a substantial portion of that service. A substantial portion is more than half. And 7.5 is half, therefore more than half is 8. And that's where 8 came from, it's a substantial portion of 15. Okay? So what we've been told by Medicare is the way the 8-minute rule works is if you do less than 8 minutes, you can't bill anything. If you do 8 to 22, you can bill one 15-minute unit. So 15 minutes is 8 to 22. And that is, we hit 23 because we take 15 for the first unit, we add 8 more. That's 23. That's how you get 2 units. To count 3 units, you do 15 plus 8 more, or 38. If we were to do 4 units, then we would do 15 plus 15 plus 15 plus 8, which is 53. And that is how we calculate that. We don't count the pre and post service time. So sitting down and documenting it, walking the patient into the room, that doesn't count as the time. I think, though, that the actual service does include, strapping them in and getting them ready. That, to me, that's not pre-service, but that's debatable. Others might argue differently. So if it's less than 8 minutes, it cannot be billed, but you can save the time and dump it into a bucket. The way the 15-minute rule or the 8-minute rule works is take the time for everything you did that's a time-based service, dump it into a bucket, swirl it around, come out with the total, divide by 15, and that's how many units you can bill. If your leftover is more than 8, you can bill 1 more unit. Okay? That's the formula for calculating this. Now, what if you have, say, 2 services of the same time? Let's say I had a 7-minute and a 7-minute, and I had 2 services, and I did them both. 7 and 7. I don't have that many fingers. That's a total of 14 minutes, so I can bill one of them. Which one do I bill? The rules say bill the one that's a higher value. What if I do one service for 8 minutes and one for 7? So one of them I did more time. The 7-minute one's worth more money. Too bad, you have to bill the one that's more time. Okay, that's what these last 2 bullets are saying. Hope that makes sense. So here's an example. Suppose you perform 97110 for 10 minutes and 97140 for 12 minutes. That's a total of 22 minutes. So the question is, how do you bill this? Do I get to bill both of those services? And the answer is no, you may not, because that's only 22 minutes, and 22 minutes is not above the threshold. That would have to be 23 minutes. So I can only build one of these, and I have to build the one with the most time, which is 97140. All right? Now, when I mentioned you dump them into a bucket, what if I had done ultrasound, which is 97035 for 5 minutes? I can't bill ultrasound because it's less than 8. But I can toss the 5 minutes into the bucket, and now I have a total of 27. That means I can now build 2 units because 2 units is 23 to 38 to 37. So I can build 2. So now I can build both of those codes. Okay, so in other words, if you do 5 services and the total time is still less than 23, you can only build one of those services. All right, that's the deal. These are time-based codes. It doesn't matter how many body areas or how many times you do it. What matters is how much time you spend. Here's one more example. 24 minutes of neuromuscular reeducation is 97112. 23 minutes of exercise is 97110. Your first glance might be, oh, I can build 2 of each because there's enough units, both of them pass 23. But you have to dump all the time into a bucket. And if I did, it's 47 minutes. 47 is 3 units. To get to 4, you have to hit 53. Okay, so I went through that kind of quick, but I'm hoping that works for you guys. This applies to all time-based codes. And so it's all these therapeutic procedure codes we're talking about now, as well as the constant attendance modalities, which would be the attended electric stim and the attended ultrasound. Those codes also fall under this rule, okay? So in other words, I lump all the time-based codes into the bucket. That came from Richard, and I'm trying to clarify for you. Okay, so a couple more thoughts on therapeutic procedures, and I'm going to dive into specifics on those codes very soon. Yeah, we're doing good on time. You must have direct one-on-one contact. So I was involved in a case where I actually ended up testifying in this case, and the situation was that the doctor was back somewhere treating patients, and there was another room where the patients were in there doing exercises, and the doctor wasn't with them. But his wife, who was the CA, the chiropractic technologist or assistant, was at the front desk, and she was just around the corner from them. She was 12 feet away. She couldn't see them, though. And the question at stake was, did they have direct one-on-one contact? Well, the first question was, can you delegate to the non-licensed staff, to his chiropractic assistant? And in that state, the answer was yes, they could. So they were okay there. The next question was, since she couldn't see them, did they have direct one-on-one contact? And that was the issue that I was brought in to talk about and testify to. And basically, I can quote from 2004, the CPT assistant, where it explains that direct contact includes visual, verbal, and/or manual contact. So we argued that they did have verbal contact with the patients, and they were relatively close if necessary. But just so you know, it's better to have visual contact. It's better to be right next to them and to be giving them one-on-one attention. And it's better if it's from the person with the license, the doctor. If you meet all those criteria, you're not going to have any problems with that issue. But when you start to delegate and then you start to not have visual contact, it becomes more of an issue that can be fought over, okay? And so you don't want to do that. Question came in about time limits from Scott. He says, does that apply to cold laser? No, cold laser is not a time-based code. All right. Joe's asking if we're going to share the recording. Yeah, we're going to post this on PayDC's website. You go to PayDC, I think it's events is where we have it. You'll find it in the menus, and this will be posted in a day or two on our website to rewatch. I want to emphasize again the second bullet here, clinical skill. Clinical skill is required for these codes, and you have to imply it through the entirety of the service. That's why the direct one-on-one contact. So if I'm hanging out and I'm just like, hey, I want to sit around and talk about my Denver Broncos, you know, I'm all about sports, and I just sit there. That's not direct one-on-one contact. That's a discussion with your buddy about sports. By the way, I'm not necessarily a Broncos fan. I just did a seminar in Denver a few months ago, and I bought the shirt. If anything, I have to be an Eagles fan because PayDC is based out of Philadelphia. So I guarantee I'm going to get a bunch of comments now from people about football teams and whatever. I'm more of a computer fan than a sports fan anyway. So you might have guessed that about me. If you just watch them and you've already taught them how to do the exercise, that's not clinical skill, all right? Standing around while they're doing something they know what to do without you doesn't count, and you don't get the bill for it. So if you have a patient come into the front and you go, hey, Susie, good to see you. Go back there and do your exercises. Come out when you're done. You can have her do that if you think that helps, and that's great, but you cannot charge someone for that. Okay, that's what this is saying. And if you say, hey, go back there and do some bench presses and some sit-ups, that also is not a therapeutic exercise. That's for strength training, and they can do that on their own. Gosh, okay, question from Sherry, and this is, I don't have the answer to this. Can you delegate to a licensed massage therapist to do therapeutic exercise and rehab? My answer to you, Sherry, is maybe, because that meets that criteria. They have an MPI number, they got a license. Maybe you can delegate to these folks. It depends. It just depends. And so talk to your state association, and they may tell you what the rule is in your group, in your area. And then Sherry's also a fan of the Eagles. Way to go. Jay, nice to see you. How about this? Using PayDC, where do you document the bucket, the service in the bucket? Richard, this is great. In PayDC, in our software, you put in the time, and when you get to the claims section, it'll automatically calculate the number of units for you. You don't even have to worry about it. You don't have to do the math. It's all done in the software. And you can talk to us if you want me to explain, but that's one of the cool things about PayDC is we know all these rules, these compliance rules and the coding rules, and we build them into the software for you. Okay. So Rod asked the same question. Can you delegate to a licensed massage therapist to do manual therapy? The answer is maybe. I just don't know. It really varies. It depends. And you need to talk to specific payers. And if you call like Blue Cross and ask them that question and they say yes, then you call them another day and someone else answers the phone, they'll probably say no. So I think you should be able to based upon what I've told you, but it really just depends. So that's my way of not answering your question. Yes. All right, so you don't get paid for the time you sit there and explain to them the difference between slow twitch and fast twitch muscle fibers and how they work and all the educational benefits of the exercise. You don't get paid for that part. That's just between you and them. You need to be able to establish that you can get some improvement within a reasonable period of time. You have to be able to predict. I think within 4 weeks, we're going to see some measurable changes. That's important as well. And if you have a secondary to Medicare, in order to get the right kind of denial for these codes, you generally have to attach the GP and the GY modifiers. That's kind of a Medicare thing, a side note. GP, GY. Actually, I think the sequence needs to be GY, GP. And that gets the denial such that a secondary will figure it out. And they'll follow the rules and accept that they need to pay. If you don't use those modifiers, then what happens is the denial says patient not responsible, and the secondary payer will go, I'm not responsible either. So the best thing to do when you bill any of these codes through Medicare, hoping the secondary will pay, is you do GY, GP. Okay? So now we're finally to the specific codes, and it's about where I wanted to be. We're halfway through the webinar, and I've got 4 codes to discuss. That was all kind of general overview, stuff that applied to all the codes. Now I'm going to dive into specifics on these codes, starting with the most commonly used one by chiropractors, 97140. This code is manual therapy techniques. I'm going to give you a little coding history. This code used to be 5 codes, and it was in the early 90s, I think. They deleted those 5 codes, replaced it with this one, and so it's kind of general. It covers a lot of stuff, but this code is different from the others because it says, do these services, and these services fall under this code. The other ones we're going to talk about, well, not massage actually, but the other 2 codes we talk about are more about what's the outcome, and if you can achieve this outcome, that's the code. So this one is about the service, others are about the outcome, and that's an important distinction in your documentation, which I'll explain more as we get into this. So what you see on your screen now is a list of the 5 different things that are included in this code. Basically, it's manual therapy, something with your hands to the patient to manipulate the tissue somehow, usually the soft tissue. So it's a passive exercise or passive activity. Therefore, at the bottom I put the payers like to see this used as an adjunct to other more active codes. 97110, 112, and 530 are all services the patient does the work and you just watch them and help them. But this one, 97140, you're doing the work, most of it, typically. So they like it to be active instead of passive as much as possible. This code is typically considered medically necessary for treatment of soft tissue stuff all over the body. Aetna has a problem with instrument-assisted soft tissue mobilization. So those of you who use things like the Graston technique and those types of things with the instruments, Aetna specifically says no on that. They don't believe that there's enough evidence to support it. Keep that in mind. When you use this on the same day of service as a chiropractic manipulation, this is kind of a weird thing, but payers think you're doing it because the manipulation was contraindicated in that area. So if someone has tons of swelling or they're so spazzed up they can't turn their head at all, they go, well, you can't manipulate that area, or it's so tender, but you can sit there and do trigger point myofascial release for 8 minutes. That's what they expect you to document to establish why. I know that you guys do manual therapy in addition to adjustments all the time, and you're struggling with getting these codes paid when they bundle them together. But the payers don't see it that way. They think that you do this instead of an adjustment because the adjustment wouldn't work or isn't indicated that day. That's what they expect to see. So just understand that's what they're looking for. Even though you and I both know that patients really do benefit from myofascial release in the same area you adjust. And you should, I think, get paid for both services separately. But it's not up to me. The rules say that that's not how it works, so we're stuck with that. Okay? So manual therapy techniques are based on the hand, so you can't bill this for machines, any machines that you think might do this. I don't care how many regions you treat. That's not what matters. What matters is the amount of time you spend. Medicare has said that they expect this to be 3 to 6 visits, tops. So if you do this for 30 visits in a row, I'm going to look at your records and try to figure out why the heck you think you should be able to do that many. You might think that's great, but payers do not expect to see that many of this service. They're going to say, wow, that's a bit of a challenge. So 3 to 6 is what they expect to see, maybe up to 18 over 4 to 6 weeks. Because 97140 includes manipulation, some providers have tried to use it as a substitution for chiropractic manipulation, but that's not the case. It's not interchangeable. Same thing with massage therapy. 97124 is massage, And some people say, well, I tried 97124 and I couldn't get paid, so I kept doing the same service and I just changed the code. Don't do that. Codes are different because they are different services. 97124 is massage. It's for effleurage, petrissage, and tapotement. Document those words and use that code. If you believe you're doing myofascial release or manual lymphatic drainage or manual traction, then use 97140. That's what that's for. Those are separate services. They're different from each other. And you should not swap out codes but not change your service. You only swap out codes if you swap out the service. Okay. So as far as modifiers go with this one, the edits tell us that you shouldn't bill massage and manual therapy on the same patient in the same encounter. 97530, which is therapeutic activities, needs to have the 59 attached to it according to the NCCI edit database, which is where we get that's who tells us when to use the modifiers, is Medicare's NCCI edits. So what I'm saying is if you bill 97530 and 97140 on the same patient, you have to add a 59 to 97530. Now, if you flip that and you bill 97140 along with like chiropractic manipulation, as you know, you have to add the 59 modifier to the 97140. Hope you guys are keeping up with me here. I'm spitting out a lot of numbers. And then there's the X modifiers, which replaced the 59 a few years ago, which are optional. I'm not aware of anyone who requires them yet, but I'll show them to you here in just a minute, just so you know what they are on the next slide. Now, we run into the issue with 97140 that it has to be a different body region than a chiropractic manipulation for it to be reimbursable. And again, what payers expect to see is that you decide to adjust the low back, but you don't adjust the neck because there's something really bad going on there and you can't adjust it. That's why you did the 97140. That's what they think is going on. And that's a different body region, right? Neck versus the pelvis. I get that. The question then becomes, well, what if I do myofascial stripping in the trapezius, but out towards the shoulder? Is that different from the neck? And most payers would say, no, it's all part of the same region because that muscle attaches in the neck, and you're going to run into trouble with that. So the farther away you can get, the better. If I'm doing myofascial release on the tensor fasciolata on the thigh, and I'm adjusting the lumbars, I think you're far enough away. But again, this is such an issue. Payers always kind of pick on this one. So here's a comment from Casey. He says he's seen that 97140 got bundled even in an adjacent region. So you manipulate the cervical, but you do thoracics. Actually, and I'm going to show you why that happened. I've got the policy right in next slide after this one. First, let me just explain to you these new modifiers. 59 modifier is the most used modifier out there, and it's a problem. Many payers, especially Medicare, say that it's overused. So they said, well, we've got to fix this. So what we're going to do is we're going to replace it with 4 new modifiers. This was, I think, 3 years ago now that they came up with these X modifiers. You'll notice that XS right there is a pretty good one. It says separate structure. It's much more clear. And that's a modifier you might want to use if the payer accepts it. My general opinion right now is that 59 is okay, but the X's are also okay to be used as replacements or instead of. And I think you might want to use the XS just because it's more clear as to what you're trying to say than the 59. If you are getting denials and they say we don't recognize the 59, it's probably because they have switched to these X's. But I haven't heard of a payer saying it's required to use these instead now. But it may be happening. Most of what I've heard is you can use either or. Okay, and at first it was only 59 that didn't accept the X's, but now I believe most payers will take the X modifiers. And if I were you, I would do XS on 97140 if it's in a different region. Okay, but it's possible the payer could say we don't like the X modifiers, and you have a problem there. So I guess the best answer here is stick with the 59 if it's working. I'm telling you, if it doesn't work, though, if they start to deny it or they don't like it anymore, it's because they probably moved to the X modifiers and you just weren't told. Okay. That question about the adjacent region, I adjust the neck, but I do myofascial release or something in the thoracics. Here's a policy from Optum, all right? And I apologize about the number of words on this slide, but I'm quoting Optum here. They outline very clearly what criteria must be met for you to get paid for 97140 the same day you do an adjustment, okay? And they have 6 criteria. Number 1, it can't be in the same region or a contiguous region. So they've come right out and said, we don't pay for cervical and thoracic. You got to go farther away. It says right there, you got to go cervical clear down to lumbar or pelvic. And that's just a payer's policy. So at least they've clarified it for us so we know what to expect. You might think that's unfair and no good, but and Optum, by the way, is United Healthcare, okay? Number 2, you got to show that there's a contraindication to chiropractic manipulation, that you're doing this because you can't manipulate that area, which again, I think is weird, but that's their rule. I don't really agree with that. Another issue I have with this is that 97140 is a time-based code and chiropractic manipulation is not. And so it's weird for me to bundle a time-based code into a non-time-based code. Like, it seems like you shouldn't be able to do that. But I think what they're thinking is that if you sit there and you do some soft tissue stuff and you're stretching out the neck and you're working some trigger points there, and then you adjust, it's all preparation, it's all part of the adjustment because it's preparation to do the adjustment. And that's kind of what they're thinking. Numbers 3 and 4 are pretty self-explanatory. Number 5 as well, you got to do the time. But number 6, it says you got to add that modifier. And that 5-9 works, or the appropriate X modifier. And I like XS as the one of the X modifier of choice. Okay. So that's the deal with 97140. If you want to get paid for this service, and I'm your auditor, I'm going to look to make sure you have a diagnosis that justifies it. Examples would be M791, which is myalgia. It also includes myofascial pain syndrome, which is the code I recommend for trigger points, because there is no code that says trigger points in it in ICD-10. Myositis, M60.8 is the myositis other site. And so you'd want to use that one to describe myositis if that's something you come across. Here's some other example codes you could use for 97140. Adhesive capsulitis in the shoulder, stiffness of joint, you got M256. Muscle spasms might justify this service. Contracture of muscle, edema, contracture of joint, all of these are considerations for codes that if you use these and link to them on your claim form, I would look at it as an auditor and go, yeah, that makes sense. Now let's say that you didn't use any of these codes and your code is M54.2, cervicalgia. I'm going to have a harder time agreeing that that's the right choice because I don't really see how this code helps with pain management particularly. I mean, I guess you could try, we could argue over it, but you're much better off if you give me a specific condition like one of these, and that's going to make me as an auditor much more likely to agree that that's a good procedure and diagnosis linkage, okay? But pain, I just don't, I could argue with you about it, and you do not want the payer or the auditor to argue with you. You want them to see what they're looking for and move on and pick the next victim, you know? So let's go to the next code, all right? That's 97140. This is 97110. This is actually my favorite because it's based on outcomes and not on the services. Therefore, it applies to anything. It applies to anything that helps with strength, range of motion, flexibility. And that's why I like this code, because chiropractors are always helping patients with strength, range of motion, and flexibility. And so think of something you do that helps with that, and you should get paid for it. You know, as long as you meet the other criteria, which is 15 minutes or at least 8, and you document functional loss and functional gain as a result of this exercise you're doing. So it's a great code in my opinion, and it pays reasonably well. That's what the RVU there is. RVU is the value of it relative to other codes according to Medicare. 0.87 puts this in the dollar amount pretty close to 98941, just to get the idea, or 9940 maybe. So there's some examples there. You know, treadmill, range of motion exercises, stabilization. If the patient's doing exercises and you just say go in the back room and do it, and you're not there with them to make sure it works, that's not covered. That's not what this code is for. You can do that with patients, but you can't get paid to do that with patients. If you have a patient who has more advanced stuff going on with movement, coordination, and balance, consider 97112, which is neuromuscular reeducation. That code has some more specific requirements we're not going to go over today because of time, and I wasn't asked to cover that one. But generally, if your patient has a problem with strength, endurance, range of motion, and flexibility, 97110 is your code, and I think you should use this one. I don't think you should try to use a different code. Most chiros that use 97112 don't quite understand the parameters and should be using 97110, in my opinion. There is a slight difference in reimbursement, but I think it's worth the trouble, okay? Farinac says, can we do ART, active release technique, as 97110, or should it be the manual therapy code? In general, active release technique, I think aligns better with manual therapy because it's closer to myofascial release, myofascial stripping, soft tissue manipulation. But I've heard this argument, and I don't really have a rebuttal to it. If I say, look, I'm doing something with the patient where we're doing an exercise that's developing their strength and endurance, range of motion, flexibility, I did it for 8 minutes, then you could use 97110. You are the one who decides, is it focused on the outcome or the service? Manual therapy, 97140 is focused on the service, and therapeutic exercise 97110 is focused on the outcomes. So that's your call. You're the clinician. You decide which one applies to your patient. All right? 97110 should not have the modifiers attached to it at all unless you're doing group therapy as well. And we're not going to talk about group therapy today, but I think it's a good solution for some of us in busy clinics who can't delegate to others. You do it all yourself in a group. It works great. So 97110 does not need modifiers, and people who put 5.9 on everything because they think it helps you get paid are totally wrong. That's why that modifier is overused and they came up with those X modifiers. All right. Again, 3 to 6 visits is typical for any particular exercise. If you're doing 18 visits on the same exercises, as a payer, I would get on your case and go, why in the world do the patient still need you to help them on the 16th visit? Like, they should have figured it out by then. They should have some measurable changes, okay? Okay, here's a question. I forget. I used to know the answer, but I can't remember. Jessica is asking about Epley's maneuver. If those of you who don't know about Epley's maneuver, it's for vertigo. You lay the patient down, you turn the head certain ways. It's billed as what? And I think when I looked into this previously, it didn't really fit a code. I can't recall. If any of you know, go ahead and put it in the questions and remind me what the deal is. She says, is it 97112 because it's vertigo? So it's a balance issue, and 97112 addresses balance. It might be. I have to look into that one. So email me later and I'll find it. I've answered that question before and I found some issues with it, and I can't remember what it was. Kelly says, can we interchange 97140 and 97530? Are they interchangeable? Kelly, there are no interchangeable codes. You can't just swap one out and pick another one. You would change the code if you did a different service. You can't do the same service and try a different code, okay? I'm going to talk about 97530 in just a minute. But 97140 and 530 are not interchangeable. A little bit more 97110. It's used for loss of motion, strength, flexibility, like I said. I don't think pain is a good indicator for it, but if you do use pain, you want to tie it to function. So if you want to say, look, I think you can 97110 for pain, fine, but focus on the functional loss because of the pain, not on the pain itself, okay? It's not about fitness improvement, flexibility, just, because they can't touch their toes, endurance, aerobic conditioning, none of that. Weight reduction, you cannot bill this code for that. It's therapeutic. It's not for, lifestyle improvements. And you have to prove that you need someone with skill to make it work correctly, okay? So I'm kind of repeating myself here. It's all about reducing edema, improving joint. Oh, sorry, we're on the new code. So we're on massage now. 97124 is effleurage, petrissage, and tapotement, which is the fancy way to say stroking, compression, and percussion. I strongly encourage you to use those words in your documentation if you're going to use this code, because then it's easy for anyone to see it's the right one. Okay, and you can use it for soft tissue stuff. I expect to see a diagnosis of soft tissue something. All right. So it's medically necessary typically when it's adjunctive to something else, because again, this one's passive. You're doing something to the patient and the patient's not doing much work. So payers like to see if you're doing this, it's to enable the patient to do their own thing, like exercises or activities. It's often not considered medically necessary for prolonged periods. So if you do 30 massages over 6 months, that's typically not okay. Hard to prove that massage, that 30th massage is still beneficial. Now, so, 6 massages, a dozen, sure, but 30, tough to prove why you needed to do it, because you have to show measurable progress. So one payer even said 2 weeks, 2 weeks during the first part of a care, which I think is a little bit limited. I think you can stretch it out to 4, maybe 6. This code is worth about the same as the last one. 0.87 is the relative value. It can't be done with a device, so you can't buy a thumper, the massager that looks like a buffer for the card, or one of these big massagers, the G5, there's other things. That's not what this code is for. Those are actually unlisted, and you can't bill for those at all, or you bill an unlisted code and hope that someone will pay you for it. This is a manual procedure. It's generally, payers have a problem with it if you do more than 30. If you do 60-minute massages, they'll argue that that's not therapeutic, that that's for comfort, and they don't like to pay for that. Or if all you do is massage and nothing else, sometimes they'll have problems with that. It's generally not covered in the same visit as 97140 because they believe that those services accomplish some of the same purposes. 6 to 8 visits, 1 to 2 units, which is 15 to 30 minutes, is easiest to defend. Okay. It needs a modifier when billed with chiropractic manipulation, but it doesn't have to be a different body area. According to the AMA's guidance, they say that you can do this one, massage, in the same area as an adjustment, and it doesn't have to be documented as a separate body region, but you still need the modifier to show that it was distinctive and not part of the work you did as part of the adjustment. Okay, and as I said, it's not covered in the same visit as 97140. I read in one policy you can do it in a different body area, but the NCI edits say it doesn't matter, you can't do a modifier with it, so I would just suggest you don't bill those on the same date of service. So if you do massage, the question is, what is a good diagnosis? What is a diagnosis I would recognize and allow you to do the service? By the way, I'm not a cat person. I just like that picture. I might become a dog person. I'm thinking about getting a dog. So what's the deal with massage? Well, I want to see a soft tissue diagnosis. M62 is where you find a lot of soft tissue diagnoses. So I've got muscle spasms, contracture, and then I've got edema listed there as well. Those are some ICD-10 codes you might want to use if you're justifying. You hear the dog behind me. Sorry about that. Yeah. That's from Jay. My buddy Dr. Greenstein is on the call. He loves dogs, and he's telling me I need to get a dog. I'm at my sister's house. That's not my dog. So, all right. He needs a massage, though, so I'll give him a massage later. Here's a question from Jim. He says, does Highmark not allow massage on the same date of service as an adjustment in Pennsylvania? Jim, I don't know about those specifics in your state. Here's the deal. The codes do allow massage on the same date of service as an adjustment. So if a payer says they won't do it, I would argue with them unless they have it in writing and you signed it. Okay, if you have a contract with them that says, I agree not to get paid for massage on the same date of service, then you're up a creek. You got to do it. But if you don't have a contract with them and they're saying that's the rule, they're wrong. And I can provide you with the documentation to show them that they're wrong, and you can fight with them and say, look, you need to pay me for this. I forget the reference, but it's in the AMA's CPT Assistant newsletter where they elaborate on the codes and say that you can do those together. Okay. So contact me if you want, Jim, if you're having issues with that. It's evang@paydc.com, and I can send you the reference. So I got one more code to go over with you, one more code. And I'm doing all right on time, so that's good. And I've been addressing the questions as they come in. So you guys feel free to toss in some questions. If I have a few minutes here at the end, we can address some of those. I got one more code to address with you. It's therapeutic activities, 97530. Now this code's a little different from the others. So look how high the RVU is. It's worth more money. It's got a higher value than the other codes. It's because it's an activity and not an exercise. Okay, it's not passive like the massage and the manual therapy, and it goes beyond an exercise, which is 97110. It's an activity. Activities involve multiple parameters. It's dynamic. So I like to say that a good example of this is things that end with ing. So the bullet here at the bottom says bending, lifting, carrying, reaching, catching. That's a good example of when this code would be applicable. It would be when you're teaching the patient how to relearn how to do those things again because they lost the ability to do it due to an injury or an illness. All right. It involves multiple parameters, not just getting them stronger and more flexible, but getting them stronger and more flexible and improving their balance all at once. So an example might be a patient who had shoulder injury and you have a trampoline set up at a 45-degree angle in the corner against the floor and the wall, and you're giving them a ball and you say, okay, for 10 minutes, I want you to toss the ball at that trampoline and catch it again. They're relearning how to catch and reach, and that's an activity that you're teaching them, and they had lost the ability to do that due to some injury and being in a sling of cast. That's the example of 97530. So the question is, if you just have a patient, doing some low back exercises, is that 97530? No, that's 97110. 97530 would be if you were teaching them how to lift properly again because they lost the ability to do so from an injury or accident. Okay. It requires professional skill of someone who is watching them and addressing a specific functional need, a functional loss, and the exercise or the activity rather results in a functional gain. So you might start with the patient on exercises, 97110, and after you do like 6 sessions of that, you might move on once they're stronger to an activity where you're trying to develop. Now you have the muscles restored and you're working on an activity afterwards. So it might be interesting for me as a reviewer to see that you do about half a dozen visits of 97110 followed by half a dozen visits of 97530. Like that would make sense to me. And these are dynamic and they need to be part of an active treatment plan directed at a specific outcome and not just for fun. So 97110 has a single parameter, exercise, strength, range of motion, flexibility. 97530 focuses on multiple parameters via an activity which incorporates all those things and more. Okay, requires the skill of a therapist. If more than 12 visits, it's going to be hard to justify. So you got to prove why that 13th, and beyond are really necessary. You got to prove it on all the visits, but it's harder the more you do. It needs the 5-9 modifier built on the same visit as a manual therapy, 97140. I don't really know why. I don't conceptually understand why those codes are considered bundled together. And the 97150 is group therapy. So if you do a group therapy and you separately do this one-on-one with this therapeutic activity, you have to put the 5-9 on the therapeutic activity to establish that it was separate from the group activity that you're also billing. All right. So if you want to justify this service, these are the things I want to see documented in your record. If you want to justify 97530, I want to see that the patient has loss of function, which is a combination of mobility, strength, balance, and so on. I want to see the exercises tie back to what the patient has, not just some exercise program you have in your clinic, regardless of who the patient is, right? And I want you to be able to prove to me the patient can't do it without your help, without your skilled intervention and knowledge, okay? So I crammed it all in. I have a few minutes left to address. There's a bunch of questions that have come in, so I'm going to work on those. Keep tossing the questions in, guys. I'm going to do questions now. We just went over some coding fundamentals, modifiers, diagnoses, the documentation requirements. I don't want you to get denials. I want you to know what to do. So here's the deal. I'm going to leave up the screen here with my email address on it. You guys can email me a question if you want, but here's my rule with free questions. I'll answer a couple of free questions, maybe just one, maybe two if they're short. But if you guys start barraging me with questions, think you have access to a free compliance expert, that's not how it goes. I'll answer your first question and I'll say, P.S. if you want to ask me more, here's how you can pay me, right? So I just want you to know that's what I do for a living. So I'm happy to help you out once or twice, but beyond that, you know, I got kids to feed. I got 6 of them, and I might be getting a dog. I got to spend money on all this stuff. So just know that. And as a reminder, I told you can go to chirocode.com and put in DRG5 off to get 5% off of a ChiroCode products. I told you to check out, to contact me if you want to look at PayDC software, you want a demo. I need an email from you that says I want a demo because you're looking for software. And if you're interested in having me do a chart audit for you, reviewing some of your charts, and you want more details about how that works, email me and say, hey, I want you to look at my charts. Okay, so that's kind of the recap. Let me go to these questions now that have come in. Hey, this is great. Thomas says, best paced, most informative webinar I've taken in years. Thomas, sometimes people tell me I go too fast. So thanks for telling me my pace was right, okay? Scott says, kids love dogs but don't take care of them. Thanks for the tips. Anyway, sorry, but let me go back to your questions about the codes. How do we code for laser or kinesiotaping? Robert, laser S8948 and S codes are from the HCPCS code set. The category they belong in, all the S codes, the heading says, ain't nobody paying for this. Those are S codes. And so cold laser, the code that describes it the best is S8948, and that's great. You can use it, but don't expect payment just because you have a code, okay? Just be aware of that. Kinesiotaping, in and of itself, in my opinion, is not separately payable. Now, if you're doing exercises and you're using tape, great. Bill for the exercises. Bill for the exercises, but you're not billing for the tape. You're billing for the exercise you're doing. The tape happens to just be there. You can bill for the supplies. Strapping codes that start with the 2 7s in the CPT code set do not apply. Those are for immobilizing, and taping to me is not about immobilization. So that's my opinion on that. Jessica's saying, well, what if I strap the fascia for plantar fasciitis or the TMJ? Well, again, stripping the fascia, not taping. I think that would be 97140. You better take at least 8 minutes doing it though, because if you're stripping the fascia, that to me is not massage. 97124 is effleurage and petrissage. You know, I'm doing some of this. I might be, rubbing things around, but when I'm stripping fascia and I'm really ripping it up, that's 97140. Okay, so here's a long question from Melissa. Let's see if I can answer it. We see prenatal patients and do round ligament massage along with adjustments. We currently don't bill for the massage. These appointments take 15 minutes, twice as long as a regular adjustment. I think we should be able to bill for the massage anyway. Let's see, can you bill 97124 for doing the round ligament for prenatal? Well, is it effleurage, petrissage, or tapotement? If it is, then sure. If, on the other hand, you believe it's myofascial stripping and you're spending a minimum of 8 minutes doing that, and that's not a region where you're adjusting the abdomen versus, because I believe, if I'm not mistaken, you do that procedure from the front, right? I think. I have to think about that because I'm wondering if that would count as the same region as a lumbar adjustment. I don't know. I'll think about that one, Melissa, and I'll let anyone else who has a comment toss it in there, and I'll read it, and I'll see if there's something else good there. Let's see here. Jamie says, great stuff. Sorry, we don't get any CEUs. Hey, Jamie, I'm pleased so Jamie is an AHIMA member. I have a bunch of AAPC certifications, and I'm not getting any CEUs for my own webinar either. So those certified coders on my presentations always intimidate me a little bit because I'm one myself, and I know that sometimes they'll catch me in mistakes, but you chiropractors don't know any different, so I can tell you whatever I want, and you just kind of listen. Gosh, lots of great questions here. Can you charge traction or for spinal decompression? No. So you're talking about 97012. It's not a great code for most payers. Specifically say that's not the right code. They used to say you could, but they've changed. Most of them have changed that. So you want S8990, I think is the right code for spinal decompression. And ain't nobody paying for that either, okay? But that's the right code. It's a cash service, just like the laser is for most payers. Dr. Rusher, can you give examples of things in the clinic for 97530? Pedibond. Hey, Dr. Rusher, I did all the Pedibond training years ago. I'm not in full-time practice anymore because I do all this consulting work, and I travel and speak at seminars. By the way, if any of you are joining us from other states and your state has some issues, you want me to do a webinar just for your members, get me in contact with them. I'm happy to do it. Or come out and speak at your conventions. I love to do that. I'd love to come out to all over and speak at your events. Give me 4 hours instead of just a quick webinar, and I can cover all this stuff in great detail. So Steve, you're asking about 97530. What are examples? Well, I gave you that example of throwing the ball and catching it again. Maybe you have an exercise where you have the patient who damaged their low back such to the point where they couldn't even lift 10 pounds. And so your job is to come up with an activity that teaches them how to lift properly. And kind of this slide, let me go back in my slides here and show you, maybe you're doing something with them, but keep in mind it's a time-based code. You see this picture at the bottom? I'm teaching this guy to properly lift. You've got to justify to me that takes 15 minutes to sit there and do this with him, over and over again. That's an example of a 97530 for the low back, where I'm teaching him how to lift again because he was so messed up he couldn't do it. So you can understand that this code pays better because it's not as common and it's more complex and it's for patients who have more serious problems. All right. So I hope that helps. I mean, the bottom line is use anything where you're trying to teach them a dynamic activity with multiple outcomes to improve their function that was lost due to an injury. Scott is asking about custom foot orthotics. What diagnosis attached to these? I shouldn't have read that question, Scott. That's beyond. And I'm sorry, Scott. I've ignored you a couple times. Talk to foot levelers. They've got a whole billing guide written by some of my colleagues, Kathy Mills-Chang, Marty Kotler, Mario Funzionari. They helped contribute, and they have a whole billing guide from foot levelers. You should check it out. They summarize it. I think it's free online. Alexandria says, I use massage with auto accents, same area as an adjustment to restore muscle function. What code do I use? Okay, Alexandria, perfect. Use 97124. Massage therapy, 97124, is appropriate to use in the same area as an adjustment. Attach the 5-9 modifier if billed on the same date, just for good measure, but you are okay to use it in the same area as the adjustment, and it's great as long as it's at least 8 minutes, preferably at least 15. If you do 2 units of it, bill it twice, you get to 30 minutes. And you're good to go. One more question from Dr. Esposito. Can I use 97110 and 97530 on the same visit if both are performed separately? Yes. Short answer is yes. Yes. There's no edit with those. In other words, if I dump those codes together, the NCCI edits don't say you need a modifier on them. They can be done the same patient, but you need to distinctly do at least 30 minutes, well, at least 23 minutes total, and you got to show separately that you did this one and you did this one. And they have different outcomes, you're looking for different things. Hey guys, we're out of time. I went over a little bit. I hope you enjoyed this as much as I did. Please, one last time, go to ChiroCode, buy a book. It's a great reference. I wrote most of it. Contact me for an audit or contact me for a software demo. I'd love to show you how PayDC can do all the stuff I'm telling you here, mostly automatically, so you don't have to worry about it, okay? Having said all that, we're all done. This will be posted on on PayDC's website within probably 48 hours. Just go to our website and look for events. Oh, you know what? We've got something. I don't know what's on the calendar, so check there. We'll do one in the next couple of weeks. Another topic. It'll probably be taught by Dave Klein, my colleague here. He's a great compliance expert. He and I get together a lot. And Dr. Greenstein, I will see you next month in I forget where I'm speaking, but I'll see you there. Oh, Florida. I'll see you in Florida next month. It'll be great. Also on our website on the events page, you'll see where we're speaking, where me or Dave Klein are speaking. So check that out. We'd love to have come to your state. Thanks, everybody, and I'll see you next time.